For the people that are listening to us on the 20 radio stations, we greatly appreciate that. If people are listening to us on the podcasting sites, like, subscribe, share. Dr. William Makis, the wellness company, we've had his colleague, Dr. Peter McCullough, on many times. He'll be coming on in 2 weeks again to talk about many different things. But Dr. Makis, you can find his Substack at Makis MD. Definitely check it out. Really good story that just came out. We're going to dive into that today. But Dr. Makis, thanks for doing what you're doing on helping the injured. And not only that, just bringing attention to these many COVID issues in the past 3 years.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
I want to talk about this because COVID changed everyone's lives that is listening to this, but it changed yours a lot. Can you talk about how it changed?
Well, my life's changed completely and my family's life. We didn't expect a pandemic when it hit. It sort of turned our life upside down. But, I didn't panic. And I was always looking at the case fatality rate of this COVID-19 virus, right? And it was always, whatever I could find, it was always, the fatality was very, very low. The survival looked to be 99.9% for any young, healthy individual, right? It seemed to only affect people over the age of 70 in long-term care homes and people with a lot of health issues, a lot of comorbidities. They were the ones who seemed to be getting sick with it. It wasn't really affecting young healthy adults or kids, right? So I didn't panic. I found the masking odd. I found the 6 feet apart rules very odd.
Yeah.
And the arrows going, you have to go in one way in one aisle, and then the next aisle you have to go the opposite way. Like all of that just seemed so stupid and so performative. It was almost like a theater, right? But you think that's going to go away, and I thought it was going to go away. And then, of course, they bring out the vaccines and they say, well, look, just the 2 doses, right? Just get your 2 doses, and then we're done with COVID-19 and it's all good. And that was a scam, right? Because as soon as they were done the 2 doses, then they started talking about booster shots, and they started talking about vaccinating kids, and the kids were getting younger and younger, and so it's been this kind of a never-ending nightmare almost, right? And then of course then people start collapsing and dropping dead after getting vaccinated, and we start seeing it in the athletes, right? You see athletes collapsing on the field and everyone's wondering what the heck is going on, and we learn about myocarditis, we learn about the blood clots. Then I started tracking doctors in Canada who started dropping dead, collapsing after their booster shots. Then we find out that these vaccines actually have a terrible side effect profile. Lots of people getting injured, their immune systems getting damaged. They're coming down with all kinds of heart issues, blood clotting issues, autoimmune diseases, neurological diseases. And, now we have this explosion of cancers, these aggressive cancers, turbo cancers, as they're being called. It just seems to never end with this nightmare.
Well, listen, I'm vaccine injured. I know a lot of people listening to this broadcast are vaccine injured, especially the people that listen on the podcasting sites, because they write to me about this and they've wrote questions to ask you about issues that they've heard about and seen. And we'll get into that in the interview. Personally, for me, I got 2 shots. The first shot, I had a little bit of a bout of vertigo when I was getting up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. Eventually faded away. I got my second shot. I got the fever and the sore arm and everything in the kitchen sink, as everyone listening to this, I'm sure, knows. And then 2 weeks after the shot, and I talked to Dr. McCullough about this months and even years back for that matter. And he said 2 weeks, and maybe you can kind of go a little bit deeper into this than, my knowledge pushes it, that 2 weeks after you get the vaccine, the spike protein is really going high tilt in your body. It's really pumping, pumping, pumping. And that's why from some people, 2 weeks after that, they have a serious episode or they have a, traumatic injury that really goes high at that period in time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, that all comes down to the fact that the vaccine doesn't stay in the arm, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that the big lie that we were told was that the vaccine stays in the arm. And if it did, honestly, we wouldn't be seeing any of these injuries.
Hmm.
Because if it's just staying locally, and that's what they would tell us. They would say, oh, you're going to get like a sore arm or maybe some
Nice.
like muscle aches, you're going to get some fevers, you might feel sick for a couple of days, and that means it's working. That means the vaccine is working, and that would be fine if the vaccine just stayed in the arm. The problem is that and Pfizer and Moderna knew this, because we ended up getting the biodistribution studies. Dr. Byron Bridle got that through a Freedom of Information request. When they tested the lipid nanoparticles on the rats, and they find out that the lipid nanoparticles end up in the bloodstream and they go everywhere, right? But the thing is that happens actually quite early on. It probably doesn't take more than an hour or two, or maybe a couple of hours for the stuff to start leaking and getting into the bloodstream, right? And so, if of course, if they did the injection and they might have hit a tiny vessel, then it ends up in the bloodstream right away. Otherwise, it goes through the lymphatic system. Maybe it takes a few hours, ends up in the bloodstream that way. So either way, it ends up in the bloodstream. And when you get that initial sort of kind of entry into the bloodstream of these lipid nanoparticles with the mRNA, this is where it starts going to different parts of the body, getting picked up in different parts of the body, and the cells are picking it up. They start making this spike protein, and the spike protein is very toxic itself. It starts messing with the immune system almost right away, right? And so that's why you see a surge of reactions within the first few days. I'd say within the first few weeks of the vaccine, because this stuff is circulating in systemically, right? It's circulating in the bloodstream, and eventually it gets out of the bloodstream. So right now, I think there was a paper that came out that showed that they're detecting mRNA in the blood up to about 28 days after the shot. So imagine that for that 28 days, you've got mRNA circulating in your blood. Eventually, right, it gets cleared from the blood. It probably gets cleared. Part of it gets cleared by the liver and through the hepatobiliary system. So people end up having like acute gallbladder attacks, right? They end up with like pancreatitis. They end up with, hepatobiliary issues that, no one knows why it's happening, but it's as the body's kind of trying to clear these lipid nanoparticles out of the bloodstream, right? So you've got this kind of a spike of issues, I guess pun intended, a spike of issues in the first few weeks, right? And then the problem, though, as we're finding out now, is that then you've got these long-term issues that show up like a year later, a year and a half later, and that could be because some people end up producing the spike protein for a very long time. And then that causes long-term problems, right? And so a lot of people come down with what they think is long COVID, right? And they're told, well, you might have gotten a mild case of COVID a long time ago. Of course, they got, 3, 4, 5 shots. And now they think they have long COVID, but they might have been producing spike for a long time. And of course, if you keep taking the shot every 6 months, you got a brand new dose. And you start the process all over again, right? Because you could be producing spike protein for up to 6 months. That's the new research, up to a 6-month period. And then you take another shot, and then, you're back to square one, and you've got a new dose of spike protein. So,
Dr. Makis, I just want to interrupt you and talk about, because you brought up the about the blood vessels. I listened to Dr. John Campbell. He's on YouTube a lot. He's got a pretty big following over in England and that.
yeah,
And he talked a lot throughout COVID, and he was talking about the aspiration,
yeah,
that when people were putting the shots in the arms, they were not aspirating. I know they didn't do it in the US. I'm sure they didn't do it in Canada. And
yeah.
I'm sure they weren't doing it in England because he brought that up. Is that why you're thinking a lot of people could have got it right into the bloodstream because they're hitting these blood vessels in general? And like, as you just stated a little early.
Yeah, I honestly think that that's a part of it. I don't think
Okay.
it accounts for all the problems. But I've read literature that this issue, it could have affected up to 5% of all people that were vaccinated. You might have hit a tiny blood vessel or gotten it in that way. Because as you're absolutely right. Nobody was aspirating, right? And so I think that's a part of it. But I also do believe that if it gets into the lymphatic system, then I believe that can also, the lipid nanoparticles can also end up in the bloodstream that way. It probably takes longer. You're going kind of through the lymph nodes first, and then you go through the lymphatic channels, and eventually all the lymphatic channels drain into the blood vessels as well. So I think either way, I think a lot of people end up with these lipid nanoparticles and mRNA in their bloodstream, and that is the problem. Is that at that point it'll go anywhere and everywhere, right? And it's a luck of the draw. Some people, they may get a bunch of lipid nanoparticles in the heart. Some people might get them in the, ovaries or testes. Some might get it in the kidneys. We see people with kidney issues, right? Liver issues. So, and I think that's why you have such a variety of side effects, because, and of course, it crosses the blood-brain barrier. And for pregnant women, it crosses the placenta. The lipid nanoparticles easily cross the placenta into the baby, right? And I think that's why when people say, well, it couldn't be the vaccine, because how can something give you such a wide variety of injuries and side effects? And the explanation is anything that's systemic and can go anywhere in the body can give you a wide variety of side effects.
I want to talk about this, and for people listening again, Makis MD Substack, that's his Substack, Dr. William Makis. I want to continue on this and speak about the injuries. We've talked to a lot of different doctors about injuries. They obviously bring up the myelin pericarditis, which you did earlier on in the conversation. And obviously, we hear a lot about blood clots. And then there's the neurological issues. Is that mainly what you're hearing about and seeing?
The neurological issues is a big one, actually. And
Yeah.
Whether it's things, like the Guillain-Barré syndrome, you've got all kinds of, paralysis issues. On the vascular side, of course, it's the blood clots. The blood clots can cause, all kinds of problems as well. People have problems with vertigo and tinnitus. Yeah. People get vision problems. People get hearing problems. And I was looking into the literature, like what could be causing that? And no one knows for certain, but a lot of the theories circle around what's called molecular mimicry, that the spike protein is a mimic, that parts of it mimic other proteins that we have in our body. So when you get the spike protein, and let's say it gets to the brain, and that you get expression, you not only just get inflammation and you get this bizarre immune response, but you also are teaching the immune system to recognize this foreign protein, but then parts of it look like other proteins in our body, and so you get antibodies that start attacking what they see, right? And that this foreign protein, but these antibodies might end up attacking proteins in your visual system, in your hearing system, and that's how people think that tinnitus might be happening, right? That it's an autoimmune attack, right? It's an autoimmune attack where you've messed up your immune system, and you've taught your immune system to attack certain proteins in your body that were normal, but because you've introduced this toxic spike protein, you've sort of messed up your immune system in that way.
A lot of people, like I said, wrote in for some audience questions. We got quite a few that were speaking about cytokine blood tests and immune subset tests. Cytokine, I'm sure you know the cytokine 14 measuring the vascular inflammation, which a lot of people, from what I understand, are having really high amounts of that. And then obviously the other cytokines, I can't name them all off the top of my head. And then the immune subset, they were saying that that's testing if the spike protein is still left in your body. Would you recommend, and again, Dr. Makis is not your doctor, personal doctor. If you do want to speak to Dr. Makis or someone that I think is very knowledgeable in this subject, I would say go to the wellness company and go through them. They do have the nattokinase. There's a lot of other things they can help you with as far as that goes. But just to bring this up, because you know more about this obviously than I do, a cytokine 14 and then the immune subset, excuse me, would you recommend people get those that are dealing with vaccine injury?
Well, I can tell you this. First, people have to find a provider that they trust, right?
Yeah.
It has to be someone you trust, and someone who's awake to the issue of the vaccine injuries, because a lot of doctors are denying vaccine injuries. They're pretending it doesn't exist, right? And they don't want to deal with it. I can't comment on the specific tests here, because again, I don't have a lab. I don't
Yeah,
have a clinic.
fair.
I'm being, constantly threatened with lawyers. I can't see
Oh,
patients, right? Because
geez.
they took my license hostage.
Right.
So it's I can't unfortunately comment on the specific tests, but I can tell you that some people are able to get tests for spike protein antibodies, and they could check the different like they can check
Oh,
the levels. Some people have very high levels of anti-spike antibodies. There isn't a specific test. And for the cytokine tests and the sort of the immune tests, that gets very specific. I can't really comment on that. That's not my
fair.
expertise. But one thing I will say that, I think there's companies are trying to develop tests for the spike protein to see if there is spike protein in your blood, or if you're still, producing spike protein, and some of it ends up in the blood. That's going to be a big one. Like if you can, whatever company develops a spike protein test, that is going to be a bestseller, because everyone wants to know if they still have circulating spike protein in their bloodstream, for example, or spike protein fragments, for example, and what those levels are, right? And
Yeah.
and this is where it comes to, the wellness company has the flagship product, the spike support, which has the
Yeah.
nattokinase, which is the main enzyme that breaks down spike protein. And right now, any vaccinated person, they don't know if they have spike protein production in their system, or if they've had spike proteins somewhere in their body, in their organs. And so I always say it's better to be proactive and take some kind of a spike detoxification, right? And whether it's Dr. McCullough's protocol with nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin, for example, he's just published this recently. That's a very good sort of a basic spike detox protocol. Or if you choose to take something else like black seed, for example, Nigella
Mm.
sativa, or some people take dandelion root, quercetin, olive leaf, NAC, N-acetylcysteine.
Yeah.
There's various things that people can take to give themselves an edge and to try to clear some of the spike protein from your body, either break it down or block it with some of these natural supplements. Even something like a 3-day fast will clear some of the spike protein from your body, right? Will clear some of the damaged cells from your body through autophagy. So it's always better to be proactive than reactive. But absolutely, if people trust a provider, get yourself whatever tests you can. Like this is important. I always err on the side when it comes to something like this. I always err on the side of get more tests and see
Yeah.
what you can find out. See what we can find out about the spike protein.
You just brought up a couple of things that I know because I watched you on Shannon Joy quite a few times, and I know she brought you up today, but I want to get into the turbo cancers, the shedding, and the
Sure.
72-hour fast. I know those are your main points of knowledge for sure, and you know a lot about those. Let's get started with the shedding since we are still talking about the spike protein with that. I haven't got a shot since 2021, obviously because I have the vertigo issue and I have issues with vision sometimes, and I
And
have
it's
an
so
issue.
common. Like those side
Yeah.
effects are so, you know what, when this is the other thing, is that in the literature they tell you it's rare, these side effects are rare. No, they're not. There are literally, whenever I look, something like vertigo, it's hundreds of thousands of people are suffering from that.
Yeah, it's really disgusting. I'll tell you this, and I know some of the people listening know my story that when this first happened, I was down in Florida. I went to a doctor. They said, you're depressed, you have anxiety. They were trying to push me on pills. Another doctor told me I should get the third vaccine shot. I mean, I thank God that I have people in my life that pushed me away from the depression medications, away from the third vaccine shot, because Dr. McCullough, we spoke about this, that a lot of people that are vaccine injured have committed suicide. And
Yeah.
those drugs are going to push people even closer towards that bad fate in general. And it's really sad because I went to Brown University. I'm sure you know that area too. As far as that university, they had a long COVID clinic. I went over there. I said, I got the vaccine 2 weeks after everything kicked in. The woman told me all you need is talk therapy. The gaslighting, as you
Right.
stated, because you talked
Right.
about finding a doctor, but the gaslighting in the medical industry is really disgusting. And I
Yeah.
had to bring that back because Again, I am grateful to people like you, Dr. McCullough, and the many other doctors, because that is a generalization. Every doctor is not bad. There are a few doctors that are fighting for people like me and many others that are way worse than me. So we are grateful to you. And I just thought people that have not heard about you, and if they are listening, they should know that you are a person that's fighting for freedom in Canada, for the people there, and also around the world. Let's talk about the shedding issue because, again,
Yeah.
my family is still getting the vaccine. Unfortunately, they're older. They, as much as I've showed them your research, your talks, Dr. McCullough, Dr. Malone, all these other doctors, there's people you just can't get to.
I know it's
Unfortunately,
hard.
it's very sad because they're in this psychosis. I call it the liberal hysteria, and it's unfortunate we have to push the politics issue here, but it is what it is. Talk about the shedding issue because people like me that are already suffering, they're worried about women in if I have a girlfriend that God forbid she got a vaccine, what that could play into sexually with me, even a family member, you use the same glass as them, you give them a hug or a kiss.
Right.
What's going on here? Give us some insight on this.
So shedding is a very interesting topic because, and the first thing I'll say is that Pfizer actually admitted that their product sheds, and it's in their approval documentation. And we were told it's a conspiracy theory and that you're insane if you think that they're shedding. And they literally say now they don't call it shedding in their documents; they call it environmental exposure, and they'll say environmental exposure through inhalation or skin contact. And that is how you can get shedding from someone who's been recently vaccinated, let's say, is, and I'll sort of explain what that means. So you can actually shed all the different components of this thing. So you can actually shed the lipid nanoparticles with the mRNA, and that comes out through bodily fluids. The most common is feces and urine, because that's how the lipid nanoparticles are kind of cleared from your system after they end up in your blood, in the bloodstream. So you don't want to be touching those kinds of bodily fluids, but a little bit can come out in sweat and saliva. So you can actually get exposed to the lipid nanoparticles with the mRNA from someone who's been very recently vaccinated, and that lasts about a week or so, that they're shedding that whole thing, the lipid nanoparticle with the mRNA. It shouldn't cause you any problems, right? Like, it shouldn't cause a person any problems, but people who are sensitive and do react to shedding, they will say that they have the strongest reactions in the first few days that someone's been vaccinated.
But what if someone, sorry to interrupt, what if somebody is already injured? Are they more to having a reaction than someone that maybe isn't injured with the shedding issue?
It's hard to say whether you'll have more of a reaction or not.
Okay.
You might, right?
Yeah.
If you've already had some, issue with the spike protein, like damaging the immune system or altering the immune system or causing immune dysfunction, and then you're basically, but again, you're being exposed to this, and the lipid nanoparticle itself is inflammatory, right? But again, it shouldn't be an issue for the vast majority of people. So that's the shedding of the lipid nanoparticles. Then something interesting happens, is as you've been vaccinated, you've got the lipid nanoparticles circulating in your bloodstream, and your cells pick them up, and now the lipid nanoparticle, let's say, releases the mRNA. Well, what the cells can do, and I didn't know this until I did the research into it, was that your own cells can actually repackage that mRNA and send it right back into the bloodstream, and then you could be shedding. Those are called extracellular vesicles or exosomes. And then, so you could be shedding those for an extra month. And those are basically the person's own lipid nanoparticles, right? Because they've repackaged them. Their own cells have repackaged the mRNA because they're trying to get rid of it. And so they could be shedding that. Now, that's where it gets interesting, is that when the particles are small, you could actually breathe them out from your lungs. And so you're basically breathing out these these particles called exosomes that can have the mRNA. And this is what Pfizer said: you could get environmental exposure through breathing in these particles that have the mRNA in it, right? So you can get exposed. So being in, so people will say that they have a reaction and they didn't touch the person who was recently vaccinated, but they still broke out in a rash or they were sick. And it's because they were breathing in the particles that this person was exhaling, these exosomes. And that, I think, can go about a month. And then the last type of shedding is the shedding of the spike protein. And the spike protein, again, it's the same kind of thing, is that, the cells, when they express the spike protein, they can actually pinch off an area like a little circular thing, and that can come out as exosomes, and you could breathe those out. So now, or it can come out in the bodily fluids like, saliva and sweat. And so now you're getting exposed to specifically the spike protein and just the spike protein in these exosomes and extracellular vesicles. And again, that could be, you could breathe those in, and or you could get it from touch. And again, that could go up to 6 months. Someone who's been vaccinated, they could be shedding those for up to 6 months. So it is an issue. Like a person could be shedding these various things for up to 6 months, and then imagine, then they get vaccinated all over again, and the cycle starts all over again, right?
So let me ask you this. I work out every day of the week. I go to the
Yeah.
gym.
Yeah.
Someone's vaccinated there. You don't
Yeah.
know it. Maybe they don't wipe down a machine. Or maybe they do wipe down the machine. Maybe they miss a spot. Who knows? God forbid. You
Yeah.
go on that machine and use it. So are you basically screwed then? I mean, what should we be doing?
Well,
We're in
no.
a
So I mean,
space.
no, but you make an excellent point, because who suffers, who seems to suffer from shedding and that kind of a contact, people who are massage therapists.
Mm.
So people who have clients, and they basically massage people, every day, right? And they get continual exposure. And even though it's tiny amounts, because shedding it's tiny amounts, but you're getting continual exposure over a long time, that might cause problems. I've heard of people coming down with blood clots. I've heard of women having miscarriages, right? So it can happen. We're basically all being exposed at all times, one degree or another. Now, again, I don't want to overblow this. Like, I don't want to panic anybody, because it really isn't an issue for 99% of people, but some people are just a little more sensitive to it. Their immune system is more sensitive to it. And if you are one of those people who gets, some kind of a reaction from shedding, you have to be aware of that. And, whether you've been vaccinated or not, if you react to shedding, the answer is the same. You should take something that either breaks down the spike protein or blocks the spike protein, and we're back to the same kind of solution, right? But I don't want to panic anybody. And I think the one question I'll field right now, you might ask it, but I'm just going to hit it right now, is,
Sure.
I have people say, well, if I'm unvaccinated, or let's say I've been vaccinated 2 years ago, am I basically being vaccinated or revaccinated through shedding? And the answer is no. The answer is no. Because the quantities are very, very, very small. It's external exposure, and your immune system is going to deal with it. It's not like a needle that gets into your shoulder and a small blood vessel, and then it's going into your blood. The two don't compare, right? There's no comparison between the two. Nevertheless, we're being constantly exposed to shedding, because they keep coming out with boosters every 6 months. And until people stop taking the boosters, there's going to be shedding phenomenon happening, and we're all going to be exposed to it some way, one way or another.
We'll get into the boosters in a second. I just want to move to
Yeah.
the 72-hour fast. When I heard you speak about that on Shannon's show, I thought that was a great idea. And how you described it is that, your cells, it's almost like a stem cell thing. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, that you're recurring these new cells. I brought that to my nutritionist. I'm taking daily due to the issues and trying to build my immune system back, because, I'm not doing for sure any shots, and I don't trust a lot of these doctors with, my health in general. And I take vitamin D, NAC, zinc, vitamin C. The list goes on and on. All good companies through my nutritionist in general. Make sure there's no garbage. I recommend that for everybody. If you can get a nutritionist, or you are buying some of these products and vitamins, make sure that they're good quality and they don't have all the fillers and gobbledygook in them. When I spoke to her about the 72-hour fast, she said, because you're taking all these supplements, it would be impossible. And the issues I'm dealing with, the vertigo and taking the supplements on the same time, the 72-hour fast would be very hurtful for someone like me because it could make my symptoms go even worse than they are. What would you tell, obviously you said this is a lot of people that have vaccine injury are dealing with some of the same similar symptoms as me, some worse, some maybe less worse. What would you tell somebody, like I said, that's me, like that has the issues with the vertigo, the pain in the eyes, the issues, the visual issues, and that's taking a lot of these supplements to try to keep their immune system and everything, fully functioning. But, likes what you have to say on the 72-hour fast.
Sure. So what I would say is that I don't believe that to be the case. Some of the people who
Okay.
are really severely injured are getting massive improvement from something like a 3-day fast, and I'll tell you sort of how that seems to work. People talk about intermittent fasting, but what they're talking about is not eating for 16 hours, right? Or not eating for 18 hours, or having a small window, and that's good. Like that, that gives that's helpful for your immune system, and so on. There are benefits to that, absolutely. However, you're not getting the big benefits, and the big benefits only come once you've been fasting, I'd say about 36 hours, 36, 48 hours, and that's when the big benefits really start kicking in, because that's when you've basically convinced your body, you've gone into ketosis, and you've convinced your body that you're starving, you're in starvation mode, and you're going to die unless your body gives you every advantage, every survival advantage that the body has the ability to give you, right? And that's where autophagy comes in. And so autophagy is body's way of clearing dead or damaged cells in your body, including immune cells. So imagine your immune system has been damaged by the vaccine, and you've got non-functioning T cells that don't work properly anymore, and you're constantly getting sick. Well, if you do a 3-day fast, after the 2-day period, your body actually starts eliminating those dysfunctional T cells, and it'll say, okay, listen, we need to reboot the immune system. We need fresh, we need fresh immune cells. We need to give this guy every chance to survive. So you have to do it for that period. It starts at around 36 to 48 hours. The body starts eliminating the damaged cells that have been damaged by the spike protein, for example. The body starts to eliminate them. Now, it's unable to maybe eliminate all of them, or it can only eliminate some of them. So it's not like a cure. You're not going to get cured of your symptoms after a 3-day fast, right? But it does help some people a lot. Like some people are able to get rid of a lot of their symptoms by doing 3-day fasts on a regular basis. It's not easy. And I can tell you, in your situation, it's a very simple solution, because the supplements, they might have some fillers in them that might break the fast, right? So you stop the supplements for those 3 days. It's a 3-day water fast, right? You take water, maybe you take some electrolytes. You could even take something like a black coffee, plain like coffee or tea. That seems to stimulate the autophagy process without breaking the fast, right? And I would actually suggest trying it. Give it a shot. I've done it twice in the last 2 months. It's fascinating, because you really get clarity of thought after about 18 hours. You get these neurological chemicals being produced that actually stimulate your neurons and stimulate some repairs as well. Like, so you get this really nice clarity of thinking. And what it also does is it gets your body to produce and release stem cells, and it'll release them to areas where your body needs them. So some of these stem cells are immune cells, where you're basically rebooting your immune system. Some of them may be other stem cells going to other parts of the body. So people might have had some chronic issues, musculoskeletal issues that get significantly improved because they got this burst of stem cells because they did a 3-day fast. So I would highly recommend it. Try it. It initially it seems like it's really difficult to do, but if you're busy and you're doing other things and you're not, there's a big psychological component to food. to eating food to preparing food. And once you realize, like, oh my God, like we actually spend a lot of time snacking and thinking about food and all that. Once you kind of sort of get rid of that, it's incredible. Like you're incredibly productive. You've got clarity of mind, and your body is going to get all those benefits. So I would actually highly recommend it, but I would recommend it doing it without the supplements and see. I mean, see how you feel. But I would not shy away from it, because some people who've been very injured by the vaccines have had tremendous improvement in their symptoms.
So you're saying because they're not eating, obviously, that it wouldn't kick up people's symptoms? Probably not.
It's hard to tell. I don't know if it's going to initially, if you're going to have any kind of worsening or not. I haven't
Yeah.
seen that. I have
Okay.
not seen those kinds of testimonials. People usually report feeling great, after and during and after a 3-day fast, right? So the first time I did it, because I'm a heavy coffee drinker, so of course no coffee. I was having headaches, like terrible headaches, and I was like, it must be the coffee, right? And so the second time, and you are allowed to take just black coffee, obviously, no sugar or cream or anything like that. The black coffee doesn't break the fast. Second time I did it, with a bit of black coffee, a little bit of water, salt in my water, and it was fine. It was just an absolute breeze. Got through the 72 hours, no problem. So I would highly recommend it. Try it. If you want to have someone sort of watching or monitoring you in terms of how you feel, because you will get a little bit weak on the third day, so you might feel a little bit fatigued. I wouldn't recommend doing something physically intense on the third day, because the third day you start to get a bit weak. But I would highly recommend people try it. And what the beauty about it is that anyone can do it. It doesn't cost you anything, right? So if you're one of these people who doesn't believe in supplements, or is skeptical of supplements, or doesn't know which supplements to take, try the 3-day fast, right?
Yeah.
It costs you nothing, and it has tremendous benefits.
So, Doc, I want to go into detox because we talked about the 72-hour fast. That's
Yeah.
somewhat of a detox, I would say personally. Maybe you disagree or agree. Okay, so we're agreeing there. Would you, somebody like, that's suffering from vaccine injury, maybe you do the 72-hour fast, maybe you feel better. Okay. And then maybe you do want to do some sort of detox. You go gluten free, dairy free, do the detox. Would you recommend people that are vaccine injured do a detox too?
Well, so it depends what you mean by detox, right? So there's kind of like a general detox in terms of like diet, right? And really, what I find is people get tremendous benefits from eliminating sugar and flour out of their diets. And then there's different versions of it. It's you could do it, like a keto diet, or some version of that. But so that's one kind of detox, kind of cleaning up your diet, right? Then the other kind of detox would be a spike protein detox. That's kind of specific to get the spike protein out of your body, or at least try to get as much of it out of your body as possible, right? And so that is a sort of a spike protein detox. And this is something that I can tell you, it's fascinating, because this is something that works for the vaccine injured. It works for people suffering from long COVID. So maybe you didn't have vaccines, but you're suffering from long COVID. And it works for people who've had very serious, kind of issues or reactions with shedding. The detox is the same, right? And I would even go one step further, is that in any sort of a future pandemic where we might get hit with new coronavirus variants, or influenza variants, or even some of these exotic viruses like Marburg virus, Ebola, Nipah virus, the approach is going to be very similar in terms of either protecting yourself, or sort of detoxing from viral proteins, or viral components. So but let's focus on spike protein specifically, right? So the issue of detoxing, approaching detoxing, I always approach it like this. You want to look at things that break down the spike protein. And there's not a lot of things that do that. And Dr. McCullough has actually focused on that. And he's got 2 out of 3 things in his protocol, nattokinase and bromelain, break down the spike protein. So the nattokinase is made from fermented soy discovered in Japan, a great enzyme that breaks down spike protein anywhere in the body. So free-floating spike protein, but also spike protein that's being expressed in the tissues. So pretty an amazing supplement, nattokinase. Bromelain is derived from pineapple plant, and it's a different kind of enzyme, but it also helps to break down the spike protein as well. And so these are sort of the key. Now, people also get things like serrapeptase or lumbrokinase. These are basically enzymes that act on the spike protein and break it down, right? So whichever version you get, I know a lot about the nattokinase, and of course the wellness company, nattokinase is the main thing that they focused on, and they've helped thousands and thousands of people. People can go to twc.health, the website, and look at testimonials and see how people have done with it. But that is a key enzyme for people who've been vaccine injured. It also breaks down blood clots, so you get this additional benefit that if you are having clotting issues, like these microclots, it'll break those down as well. It also breaks down amyloid protein. So there's amyloid sequences in the spike protein. So some people are worried that amyloid can be causing early Alzheimer's disease in some vaccinated people because of this amyloid deposition in the brain that's associated with Alzheimer's, right?
Are these the people that are getting brain fog?
Well, it could be, right? Some people are worried about amyloid deposition in the heart too, and that could be, behind some of the myocarditis at least as well, right? So the nattokinase will break that down as well. So it's a multifaceted, supplement, but it hits a lot of these areas nicely. So that's breaking down the spike protein. That's number one, right? Then there are a lot of supplements that will block the spike protein from doing damage. So maybe they don't break down the spike protein, but they'll kind of attach to it, or they'll block it from doing the damage that it does. And a lot of people are familiar with these. These are things like quercetin.
Yeah.
These are things like NAC, N-acetylcysteine, black seed. This is Nigella sativa. This was in the FLCCC protocol. If you couldn't get ivermectin, you get, black seed or Nigella sativa. Things like dandelion root, white pine needle. People make tea out of white pine needle or dandelion extract, right? Again, part of that is in the spike formula that the wellness company has. What else? Olive leaf extract is another one that blocks the spike protein. So there are things that people can take, and it's a matter of preference. You try out and see whatever works. Some people really do well with quercetin. Some people love olive leaf. Some people love drinking white pine needle tea, right? It varies, but all of these things block the spike protein. Then I'd say take an antioxidant, take some kind of antioxidants. Vitamin C, right? You have to be taking vitamin C. Vitamin C, cheap and a great antioxidant. It actually cleans up a lot of the damage done by the spike protein. The other big antioxidant is NAC, N-acetylcysteine, right? And this is the one that actually FDA is looking to go after.
I heard about that.
I believe early on they tried to go after it and try to see if they could get it taken off the market. And this is what we're going to see is that these institutions like FDA or Health Canada, they're going to come after natural health products and try to get them taken off the market. Anything that can help the vaccine injured, because they don't want you taking nattokinase or NAC or quercetin. They want you taking Eliquis, which is Pfizer's blood thinning medication, or they want you taking expensive medications that they can make a lot of money on, right? And so those are the main things. Then I would add vitamin D, extremely important for your immune system.
5,000, 1,000. What do you think?
Oh, I would be looking at minimum 5,000.
Okay.
Right. Like I would be looking at somewhere between 5 and 10,000. Right. At least get your levels up, because most people are vitamin D deficient.
Yeah.
It was found that I think if you got your vitamin D levels high enough, that 90% of COVID hospitalizations and deaths, up to 90%, could have been avoided. This was people who were either vitamin D, deficient or severely deficient. And the ones who were severely deficient, they were the ones ending up in the ICU and dying. right? And those studies were suppressed, right? Those studies came out, but there were
It's
two or
cheap,
three. It's
cheap
cheap. And
drugs.
the thing is, when I noticed, and when they attacked vitamin D, they attacked vitamin D at the same time they attacked hydroxychloroquine,
Yeah.
and at the same time they attacked ivermectin. There were some vitamin D studies that were actually retracted. They forced them to retract because they didn't want people to know that vitamin D was actually helping people who were even hospitalized with COVID-19. Even there, and there, you're looking at doses of like 100, 200,000. I think the highest I saw was 600,000 units of vitamin D, and it was helping people who were hospitalized with COVID-19. So vitamin D is extremely important for the immune system. I think everyone should be taking it. I'm taking it every day.
Yes.
Get those levels up, and it'll give you some cancer protection as well. Because this is what the COVID vaccinated also need. They need some protection against cancers. These aggressive turbo cancers. You
Yeah.
want to have some protection against that. No one's offering any kind of protection for that right now. But you
Listen,
want
you
to,
said it. I want you to hit those turbo cancers because it's crazy. There was a guy down the street from me. He was in his 40s. He was a police chief over here. He used to run every day, about 5-ish miles. He's dead now. He had got cancer, dropped dead. It was real fast cancer. I don't know particularly if it was the vaccine, but I'm thinking this guy was in tremendous shape. He's 40 some odd years old, was always running like a deer, and then all of a sudden he gets this fast-paced cancer and just drops. And when I heard that, I thought of what you said on Shannon Joy's show about the turbo cancers.
yeah.
So
These cancers they're showing up in young people, right? And they're showing up in people in their 20s and 30s and 40s, and they'll tell you, oh, it's the missed screenings. We don't screen people in their 20s and 30s and 40s for stage 4 breast cancers and colon cancers. Like, it's complete nonsense. This is a new phenomenon, right? This is a vaccine issue. And I mean, we all have to kind of protect ourselves, from this, because the doctors are ignoring it, right? And I think vitamin D, getting your vitamin D levels up, it gives you some protection against that kind of outcome. And I'll tell you, the best way to protect yourself against, I mean, all of these potential terrible outcomes, and that, like, the sudden deaths, there's usually no warning, right? So I just put out a huge article on something like 50 people who died in their sleep just in the last couple of months. Perfectly healthy young people, went to sleep, never woke up again, right? Dr. McCullough talks about this a lot, with the myocarditis and stuff. The best way to deal with all of this and address all of these risks is to do like a spike protein detox, just the way I'm talking about it now. So after vitamin D, the other things you can do to help your immune system, things like magnesium and selenium, these are minerals, very important for your body, for your metabolism, and for your immune system. So people should be looking at taking some magnesium supplement. Some people are selenium deficient. It causes problems with their immune system, so they should look into that. You could try to get your doctor to test those levels and see if you're deficient. But it's an easy supplement to take. And something like melatonin is also very beneficial. It not only stimulates your immune system, actually it stimulates production of your cytotoxic T cells that some people have damaged after vaccination. It actually stimulates production of new T cells, which is fascinating. I didn't know that. And if you do higher, it's also protective against cancer. It's actually melatonin is being used in high doses to treat some very aggressive cancers right now. So it's a fascinating thing. And again, another like really cheap supplement, right? And so, and of course, we talked about things like the diet, cleaning up the diet, exercise, of course, important. But I would caution with exercise in that anyone who's been vaccinated, I would caution against vigorous exercise, because unless you've done a long-term spike protein detox, or you've had some kind of a cardiac workup, because people are still collapsing. Athletic people are still collapsing from heart injury, myocarditis, having heart attacks, and sometimes it's brought on by very vigorous exercise.
So let's get into that fast because Dr. McCullough brought up the cardiac MRI. A lot of doctors aren't going to do that right away. They go to the EKG, you get maybe the echocardiogram, they see everything's right, and they call it quits. Personally, that's what happened to me because after the vaccine, I was getting chest pains too. They said the EKG is fine, the echocardiogram's fine. They did it months later, the same thing, everything was fine. No one even talked about the cardiac MRI. So
Yes.
if you did get an EKG, that's fine, an echocardiogram's fine. Should you still be worried because you didn't get that MRI? And as you stated, Bronny James, Darrell Harmon, the football player from the Buffalo Bills, these guys are dropping like flies, even though maybe they got the vaccine 2 years ago. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't know if, how many years, but I'm thinking probably they got it in 21. This is still going on. So should somebody be worried if they haven't had that symptom, or if they've gotten the EKG and the echocardiogram, it's came out fine? What do you think?
I would say honestly, I would err on the side of caution. If you've had the vaccine, let's say you had your last vaccine a year ago, maybe even a year and a half ago, maybe you haven't had any symptoms or you haven't noticed any symptoms, and you're kind of an athletic person, but you've done nothing to address any kind of like a spike protein, detox or anything like that. I would caution against vigorous exercise. I really would, because I'm still reporting on a daily basis young people collapsing, and it's men and women.
Yeah,
There's women that are collapsing as well, and you see it in some of these young women athletes,
yeah.
right? Like I'm reporting these young soccer players from Australia or UK. They're collapsing, they're dying. They're 20 years old, 22, 23 years old. So it's not just a problem for men; it's men and women. And any kind of sort of an athletic-minded person, people who like to do triathlons, right? People who like to do Ironman, they're still collapsing, right? So I would caution against vigorous exercise. I know it's hard to get a cardiac MRI. If you have the money, you can get it privately, right? Most people don't have the money, so you're not going to get that access. But what's the next best thing you could do? You could do like a 3-month or 6-month course of a spike protein detox, right? I think Dr. McCullough, I think he recommends at least 3 months of let's say his kind of basic spike protein detox. Do that, do the fasting, do a couple of 3-day fasts. And I would at least, do those things proactively, right? Do that proactively. We've been looking at taurine. I've been looking at specifically at taurine, which has protective effects on the heart and could protect against myocarditis and myocarditis inflammation of the heart. It's being used in Japan. Taurine in Japan, they have high levels of it in their diet, like octopus, seafood, fish, and they have very high levels of taurine that they eat, and they have no ischemic cardiac heart disease. They have no heart disease, and they have it's contributing. It's felt to be contributing to their longevity. Taurine is another one of these supplements you can get for $10 on Amazon. It's no one's going to make any money or become a billionaire off taurine, right? So the pharmaceutical companies will never tell you about it, right? But you have to take these steps to at least protect yourself in some way, because unfortunately the sudden deaths are still happening, and I can tell you that the sudden deaths of people ages sort of 18 to 50 are the highest that they've been in the past 3 years. Right now, they're at the highest level they've been in the past 3 years. And that is really frustrating to me as a physician. I've talked to Dr. McCullough. He's very frustrated about it as well.
I agree. I want to get to the last three questions and be
Yeah.
very gracious with your time. Appreciate what you're doing and staying on with us this long. We talk about the vaccine uptake in Canada. What is it compared to the US? It seems like in the US it's at about 2% from what we're getting right here. I think that's amazing. I wished it was zero, but
Yeah.
it's at least it's only at 2%.
So I had a look at the last data that was put out by Health Canada, and they put out this data in kind of 3 months. They put it out every 3 months. So it kind of tells you that who took how many vaccines in the last 3 months. Well, before their last recommendation, which was in the States, it was September 11th. In Canada, it was September 12th, where they said, go get your new booster shot, and it's new and so on. We're approving it for everybody, including babies as young as 6 months old. At that point, the number of people who had taken a jab in the previous 3 months was less than 1%. It was about 1%, right? So it was basically, very, very low. And I know that in the States, There hasn't been any kind of rush to go, get this new booster shot, this 2%, which is amazing to see. Of course, in Canada, they recommended the jab on September 12th. And so I'm sure there's a small group of people who are going to rush out to get it because they've gotten every booster up to this point. I reported recently on my Twitter account, a 40-year-old school teacher in Ontario. She had 4 shots back a year ago. She got all her kids at least 3 shots. She said she's had COVID in her house at least 3 times. She wears an N95 mask everywhere she goes. She wears an N95 mask and forces her kids to wear N95 masks indoors and at home. Like wow. There are people like this. She's a teacher. She's a teacher in Ontario. These people walk among us, and she will be lined up to get her latest booster shot.
How do we get to these people though? Because I know these people. I see these people around. They're still wearing the mask. Listen, I was in the hysteria too. I've told everybody about this story quickly. I was walking around in Florida wearing 2 masks. I was scared to death. That was before I got the vaccine. Obviously, now that I'm injured, I opened my eyes and seen the light of the insanity of what was going on in 2020 and even 2021. But you don't have any ideas of getting to these people because it's really sad. Like,
I know.
We can say that we were brainwashed before because all the stuff on the TV and, you got it for your mother, your sister, your grandmother, everybody in the kitchen sink. That's over now. We see that this stuff doesn't work, that the masks don't work, that the vaccine doesn't work. But there's still people, as you stated, that are like almost in this hypnosis. They are psychotic. I hate to use these words because it's our fellow man, our fellow woman, but regardless, it's sick.
Yeah. Honestly, I think it's just being persistent, and we just keep going, right? We just keep I keep doing interviews. I keep putting material out on my Twitter account, and sometimes people will tell me, they say, listen, Dr. Makis, I got to take a break. I can't look at your Twitter or Substack anymore because I need a break from all the sudden deaths, right? But I'm like, look, I'm trying to wake people up, right? Trying to wake people up to stop taking these toxic pharmaceutical products. They're toxic pharmaceutical products, right? They should be off the market, should have been off the market years ago, but they're still on the market. There's still people taking them. There's still kids getting injured. There's still pregnant women getting injured, right? There's adults still being injured by these things. So I think it's just being persistent. And, you never know how people are going to wake up. Like, people will tell me, they'll say, I never heard of you, but I saw you on, Shannon Joy's show, or I saw you on Del Bigtree for the first time, or you never know what people are watching and when. And so I think it's just a matter of just continue to try reaching people non-judgmentally, right? I mean, we all got fooled one way or another throughout the pandemic, right? And so we've all been lied to, we've all been tricked. And we've all been harmed. We've all been hurt, whether we've been vaccinated or not, or how many shots we've had. We've all been harmed through this pandemic one way or another.
Well, listen, people trusted their doctors because they believed they were intelligent people and that they were going to push them in the right direction. Most of them did not. Obviously, you and a lot of other doctors were helping people where the other people were pushing them in the wrong direction. A lot of doctors were making a lot of money off pushing the vaccines.
That's true.
That is not being told. People trusted their politicians to show them the right direction. They did not. So again, as you said, people were hoodwinked, bamboozled, whatever word you want to use, and it's really disgusting of what happened. And how do we move forward in help people gain trust in the medical system again? I don't trust any of these doctors. I do trust doctors that are helping people that are vaccine injured, such as yourself, Dr. McCullough, Mary Talley Bowen. These are people that I've interviewed that I've gained trust in, and I believe they're doing the right thing. And you guys have lost your whole lives. Yeah. You've lost licenses. You've gotten licenses suspended. They've, jammed your practices down into the ground. But a lot of people don't trust medical advice at all because of what's happened in 2020 and beyond. So is there a way to get this back, or is this just the way it's going to be, that you have to find doctors, as you stated, that are hopefully the right doctors that are helping you get better and physically trying to help you be the best you can be?
I think it's going to be very hard to rebuild trust and for the medical community and medical establishment to get that trust back. I think it'll ultimately come down to people finding the healthcare providers that that share their ethics and that they can trust and believe in, and just focus on supporting those healthcare providers, right? And ultimately, I mean, this pandemic really kind of forced a lot of us to start forming new communities, right? To start forming, make new friends, make new associations, and make new groups, right? And so I think that's just going to continue. I think we're just going to continue. People are going to keep reaching out and finding and supporting healthcare workers. And I'm not talking about just doctors. I'm talking, nurses, physiotherapists, naturopaths, all kinds of health practitioners that are, that are ethical, that want to help people, and that people will trust. And I think some doctors, I think some doctors they're waking up, and I think that they will make that transition where they'll say, I'm really sorry, I made a huge mistake with this toxic pharmaceutical product. I pushed it on everybody. I took it, I gave it to my family. And they'll make that transition, and they'll have to realize that they made a mistake. They'll have to reevaluate what they've done. But I think we just keep supporting those who are awake and who are trying to help people, and we keep making sort of new communities as we go.
Last question. Do you feel like people will fully recover? Do they have hope, these people that are injured?
I honestly believe that the vast majority of people can recover, and if not fully recover, at least recover to have a normal life, or to have a good life. Like, I have tremendous hope in this, in that we can undo the vast majority of the damage
But you guys are getting
harm
hammered
that's
by
been done.
governments and other
I know
governmental
it's not
institutions.
easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy, right? But I think, and this is where the individual comes in. I think people have to be proactive with their health in a way that they've never been before, right? And I think a lot of us have been, and I've been guilty of this too. A lot of us have been complacent with our health. We think, I feel fine. Maybe I'll go to the doctor once every few years and what have you, right? But I think people have been complacent, and they relied on the doctors to be there for them if they needed them. And of course, now, when this happened, when the pandemic happened, the doctors weren't there for the people, or they gave them bad advice, or they gave them wrong advice, right? So it's kind of like everyone has to take ownership of their health. But if you do, I think there's tremendous hope. And anyone who's been vaccine injured, I would say, reach out to some of the doctors who are helping vaccine injured, or healthcare providers, and don't give up hope, because and try different things. There are a lot of options, and I think there'll be more options for the vaccine injured as we go forward, and as we discover some of these things. Like, I'm sort of bringing up literature, for example, about ivermectin and its action on treating cancer and aggressive cancers.
Yeah.
Right. And so, we're looking now beyond the pharmaceutical complex and the stranglehold that they had on medicine. And I think there's a lot of hope there. I think there's a lot of good, supplements and even medications that have been suppressed because they're not making money for the pharmaceutical companies, but they're helping, people who've been injured. And so I think it's important to be proactive with your health and to not lose hope, because I think a lot of this damage can be undone.
Yeah, well, we're grateful to people like you. This was a great conversation. I look forward to having you on in the months ahead, because people need to listen to you. And again, for people that want to find more information on Dr. Makis, it's Makis MD, Substack, Twitter. I would say if you got the $5, get the Substack. There's a lot of great information on there. The wellness company, twc.health. Definitely check it out. The spike support, definitely worth it. Tons of people got vaccinated. You need to do something to help you move forward in life. God forbid, we want to make sure that we could save as many people as we can. Dr. William Makis, thanks so much. I really appreciate you coming on the program tonight.
Thank you very much for having me.